Sometime during the third consecutive night spent huddled over the toilet, insides heaving and shuddering as I vomit forth seemingly everything I had ever eaten, I realize what's happening. He's trying to poison me. It's all so elegant, so perfect, so clear. I almost laugh, but another barrage of vomiting forces me into silence. The next morning, I throw everything in the kitchen away, wrapping it 3 times in black plastic. I bury it deep in the apartment's communal trash cans. I'm out the door of the complex and halfway to the corner store when I realize he must know where I would shop. I pick a direction and I start walking, enjoying the chill winter air that soothes the ragged shreds of my inside. I turn at random intervals, following an improbable path out of my familiar neighborhood until I find a small shop with an unfamiliar name. Once inside, I hurriedly fill a small plastic basket, brands that I know I've never eaten. Strange tins of ethnic ingredients I don't recognize. Foods that I've never thought of buying. Soy milk, tofu. I can feel my stomach being reborn as I shop. I prepare the meal in a fog of nervous anticipation, trying to focus on savoring the aromas and the grease-spitting sounds of the frying pan. It tastes clean. But then, so has every other meal before this, I try to tell myself that the mounting pain inside me is simple fear and anxiety. But before the stroke of midnight, once again I'm crouched in the dingy bathroom, surrendering the day's work into the porcelain mouth of the sewer. The next day, I pack up the remaining food and dispose of it with the same care. I eat out that day, layering dead onto the last of my credit cards at restaurants on the opposite side of town. He's more clever than I could ever imagine, and I am awash in despair as I spend another sleepless night gagging and sobbing on the tile floor. I imagine the algorithm, the perfect predictive models at his disposal, brilliantly charting my every move across the city. Every time I thought I'd outwitted him, I was willingly walking into his web. I buy a candy bar from a vending machine in a theater, hold it close like a talisman. When I get home, I fill the bath a few inches deep with rust-colored water, and I hold the little plastic-wrapped bundle beneath the water and I squeeze. I know that I will see it, but it still breaks my heart when I do. A thin, almost invisible stream of bubbles picks out the point where a foreign object has pierced the protective layer. Through the haze of piercing hunger, I convince myself to try just one bite and to take a chance. It's a gamble that I do not win. In the small hours of the morning, as I pressed my fists into my empty protesting belly, I imagined the legion of his followers sliding silently through the restaurants and produce aisles of my life, slipping hypodermic needles into carefully selected packages of food. They are ruining and corrupting at his whim, surgical and efficient, before vanishing into the throng of the city at my approach. They will always be one step ahead of me until I learn to think in new ways, to chart new cognitive pathways, to turn the game back upon him. So I tell myself, this is what I must do. The first day of my new life I spend in the small living area of my apartment, organizing my thoughts with clean and sterile efficiency, and conserving what energy I can from my wasting body. Night brings the retching sickness, but all that arises is water and pills, half digested. The pills, of course, not for the first time. I feel a sharp twinge of respect for crystalline perfection of his plans. I dump the last of my dozen prescriptions into the toilet. On my third day, I feel a clarity and a sense of purpose that shocks me in its intensity, and my will penetrates the starvation malaise. I must win, or I will die. The rashes and sores in my cheeks are deeper, and I can feel the gentle sway of loose teeth in my desiccated mouth when I grind them at night. He is winning, but not for long. There is still time. Water. I collect from the roof in a small army of cheap hardware buckets. I know that somewhere in the Byzantine plumbing of the aged building there must be one of his infernally clever devices. A tiny pump, squatting like a predator and pulsing its vile contents into the water main. I'll have to give up bathing. A small sacrifice. The rainwater will keep me alive for a while longer. But I must find a way to eat. The answer comes to me in a small, unconnected puzzle piece over the next few days. While gently working another loose molar from my bleeding gums, they suddenly snap together, and the warm, smothering blanket of epiphany coats my aching frame. The clattering of the tooth into the sink basin is like the ringing of bells. Later in the evening, I begin another unconscious walk, drifting through the city on shaking and atrophied legs, knowing full well that he is watching. But this, my beautiful solution, is beyond even his reach. I choose the house at random, and then, in one final attempt to baffle the algorithm, turn around and choose another house across the little tree-lined street. I sift through the mail. It's a small sample size, but enough to confirm the most necessary of facts. A single occupant. The poor man is surprised to have a visitor at all, and his face contorts with fear as I force my way inside. I am flooded with guilt and regret as I push him to the floor and strike quickly with the crowbar I pull from the folds of my jacket. I must steel myself. This is his fault. He has brought us to this, and this poor man is just another of his victims. I make quick work of the meat. The muscle memories of summers spent hunting in the mountains when I was young flaring up with each quick cut. I allow myself a quick bite, a feast to my shrunken and withered stomach. The iron and mineral salt taste floods my head like a vapor, and I bawl in relief like a child. When I have the meat packed tight in my rucksack, I light a single candle on the top floor of the little house and turn the gas range on high. I'm not home yet when I hear the low rumble in the distance, and the pulsing lights of fire engines, highlighting the black cloud hanging in the sky. For the first time in more than a month, I sleep well. My body rapidly heals as pure, untainted nutrients penetrate my cells. I am not yet well, but after a few more meals, I will be ready once more to fight him. I know I can beat him now. I know the algorithm can only predict the actions of my past self, bound by the laws and morals of the old world. That world is dead. I am a free man. The earliest example of my power I can remember is when I was 3 years old. Sitting on the beach with my dad, we were staring out across the sea watching the waves drift gently in the wind, just enjoying the moment. I was on his lap, slowly falling asleep, when the setting sun seemed to twist and bend before my very eyes as it descended beneath the ocean surface. Within moments it had finished its transformation, taking the shape of a yellowish heart. Great bands of red suddenly pulsed across the sky, soaking through the clouds and stretching for miles and miles. I remember being awestruck at the silky smoothness of that color, and the way it drifted outward like waves washing against the shore. The next day, my dad proposed to my mother on what she always described as the happiest day of her life. These strange sunset visions would keep happening for years to come. Sometimes I would see a face materialize from behind a cloud, and soon it would appear in my day-to-day life. Other times, I'd watch weather patterns mirrored in the sunlight, from snow to floods to tornadoes. Once or twice a year, I would even see entire scenarios play out in stunning detail, like a movie being projected into the sky. It was a power that I'd always treasured, but never shared, no matter how much I wanted to, though I fear that the time for sharing is over. 1 year ago, I sat outside waiting for the sun to set, as I did every day. I live in the highest house of a particularly rural countryside area, with a once mesmerizing view of the sunset. My mind was weary and aching for sleep that night, so I was half awake when I saw a sheet of pure black begin to creep over the horizon. It slowly washed around the curvature of the sun, and it began to erode the sky, little by little, like an ink spill across a piece of paper. I could only watch as the darkness traveled further and further upwards, desperately willing it to stop. Black is never a good omen, and that night, I saw more blackness than in any of my previous visions combined. Since then, my sunset visions have ended, but the piercing blackness has remained, and instead of gradually fading away as I hoped it would, it has only occupied more and more space as time goes on. Just a few months after my initial vision, the blackness occupied an entire quarter of the sky. In June, that fraction doubled. It was totally surreal, like half of the world was trapped in night, unable to break through to the morning. As the suffocating blackness grew, so did the turmoil of everyday life. I heard ever-increasing reports of war and conflict breaking out across the entire world. Riots, shootings, terrorist plots. They're constant. Food is becoming short, as is drinkable water, and the worldwide climate is taking a turn for the worse. And although these struggles affect the entire planet, no one but me can see the cause. The earth is choking under the poisoned sky. The beautiful visions I saw when the sun still shone were replaced with foreboding nightmares that soared across the blackness. I see only imagery of bombs, screaming children, ruined towns and cities, bodies piling up by the millions. There are bones and fire and mutilated corpses and starving families. Each vision seems to be more terrible than the last. Today was the day the blackness reached the other side of the horizon. There are sirens blaring constantly. I hear people shouting. I've barricaded myself in my home. Occasionally, there are gunshots, but that doesn't matter anymore. A few minutes ago, I saw a bright flash and a mushroom cloud appear on the horizon, and another, and another. Now, all I can envision is screaming. To anyone who finds this note, I'm sorry. Sorry that I didn't have the confidence to share my insight with the world. I'm sorry that I hoarded my visions instead of telling somebody, anybody, what I knew was happening. Maybe if I hadn't been so greedy, the world wouldn't have suffered so much. I can feel the wind picking up through the broken windows. It won't be long now.